asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Yeah, so if you have joined me, thank you for not watching the football. Although you probably are listening to me with the football on in the background. That is UK listeners, of course. If you're outside the UK, you might not give a rat's backside about the football this evening. If there's anything to tell you, I will of course tell you, just in case you're at work or you're driving and you've got me on the old hands free. Right, I'm going to give not a trigger warning, but a language warning. Not necessarily my bad language, but I'm going to be discussing themes in the monologue that are not suitable for children. And if you do sometimes have young children in the room listening to this program, it's advisable that you don't let them listen to this particular monologue. A strong warning on language that is not suitable for children to hear and themes. Okay? Okay. So I've said that now. I can't say it again. I'm just going to move on. Let's visit the fuckery files then. What a day it's been for journalism. What a day it's been for lies. What a day it's been for genuine and general bullshit all round. Listen to this. Members of Parliament, in fact MPs who sit on the Exiting the European Union Committee, have said that we might very well need an extension of Article 50 to prevent the UK crashing out of the European Union with no deal. Now, this is not one or two Remoaner MPs. These are very influential people. We've got to maybe extend Article 50 and maybe put to bed for the moment the idea of leaving the European Union in March next year to give Theresa May more time. In fact, these MPs warned that Theresa May needs to understand that time isn't on our side. This report was released today, I've got to mention again, by the Exiting the European Union Committee, who said that even under the most optimistic outcome of a withdrawal agreement being reached by the autumn, 5 months might not be enough time for necessary proceedings. The Exiting the European Union Committee, saying that we need to suspend Article 50 or extend it, have said that we will have one of the most significant parliamentary debates in a generation, demanding at least 5 days to debate this concept in the House of Commons. The concept that Article 50 would be put on hold for a bit, and we accept that the two sides need a bit more time. The report says, and I quote, "It would be unconscionable if the House of Commons was not provided with the opportunity, both for the fullest debate and to enable a clear expression of its opinion." So this committee warns that the government may have to request a limited extension of Article 50 to prevent the UK leaving the EU next year without an agreement, in the event of parliamentary consent on either side of the negotiations being delayed.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Well, it's a betrayal of the vote, you see. It's a betrayal of the people who voted to leave the European Union in June of 2016. Why? How has it happened? Well, Remainers have convinced the country, and by the country I mean your neighbours, your friends, your work colleagues. Remainers have convinced the country, with the assistance of the whoring, bastarding media, that no deal is an untenable situation. We can't leave without a deal has been beaten into the public's collective consciousness. No deal would be fatal, we would be fucked, has been drilled into the subconscious of every man, woman and child in this country. Now, it's totally untrue, by the way. And the academics and entrepreneurs who were demonstrating how much we'd be better off by leaving with no deal, they've been marginalised by the mainstream media. What does the UKIP MEP and the man who did more than anyone to get the referendum on the table Nigel Farage say. He was speaking with Sky News earlier today.
Did you know the only crumb of comfort for people who voted leave is that we appear to be on track, given that the Royal Assent was given this week to the EU withdrawal bill, we appear to be on track to leave at 11 p.m. on the 29th of March next year. Everything else we're pretty unhappy about, whether it's taking back fisheries, whether it's being free to make our own trade deals, whether it's getting back control of our borders. The only crumb of comfort was leaving on the 29th of March. And frankly, if that gets delayed, that will be betrayal. No other word for it.
But if the alternative is a hard Brexit with no deal, many people in the UK would say that could be a financial disaster.
Well, listen, we were told if we didn't join the euro, it would be a financial disaster by many of the same voices telling us leaving without a deal is a disaster. This referendum that we had back in 16 was about whether we become an independent country. That's what people voted for, and that is what's got to be delivered.
Even if there's a price to be paid, even if car manufacturers, plane manufacturers pull out the UK.
As I say, we've heard all this before, going back to the euro, what the government needs to do...
We're in reality now, aren't we? I mean,
what the government needs to do...
Businesses are making their plans.
Well, what the government needs to do... The government now needs to come up with a radical new plan and needs to start getting European businesses on their side. Because, clearly, it should be in the interest of the European Union to have a sensible trade deal with us, because they sell us more than we sell them. They're not behaving that way. I think we've got to try some different tactics. We've got to be a lot more radical, but the British government needs to get European businesses, car manufacturers in Germany, etc. We've got to get them on our side against what Monsieur Barnier is doing.
Can she?
No, but we can try a bit harder than we have been. At the moment, the whole Brexit process appears to be operating on civil service to civil service level. We need something better than that.
I mean, you said to me last time we talked that British industry was only 10% of the British economy. I mean, that sounds a bit like Boris Johnson, although put a bit more politely than he did.
No, the point I'm making is 90% of the UK economy is governed by the rules of a single market without exporting to Europe. What we need to do is to be free of regulatory alignment that allows us to become competitive and to go global.
Now, Nigel Farage has had his hair styled and dyed to make him look like Donald Trump. I jest you not. Google it. Google Nigel Farage hair and look at the photographs. He's turning into Donald Trump. Anyway, more from Nigel in a minute. Now, the European Union has been negotiating in bad faith. It never had any intention of reaching any agreement with the UK negotiating team. It had no intention ever of reaching an agreement with David Davis, the Brexit Secretary. And European Union puppets in Westminster, Chuka Umunna, Anna Soubry, Philip Hammond. And Philip Hammond should be in the Tower of fucking London for treason. The Chancellor, whose department is working to thwart Brexit on the orders of the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund. EU puppets in the BBC. They've all been chiselling away at the result from June 2016, haven't they? Which, as I said earlier, they've worked to enshrine in the minds of the public that there can be no deal. And that if the government attempts to walk away without a deal, Parliament would take over. They largely remain supporting Parliament. So what they did in doing that was cut the legs out from under Brexit Secretary David Davis. Because in any negotiation over anything, if you're haggling over the price of fucking nappies, the ability of both sides to wipe their hands and say, fuck off, you're a bad egg, I don't want to work with you, that is paramount to have that in your armoury. Right, I'm doing the best I can. You're negotiating in bad faith. That's it. Fuck off. Job done. And they've taken that away from the government. And Brussels has laughed its arse off and is letting the clock run down, knowing that it has positioned itself at checkmate. And Theresa May today, I swear, is in such a state of desperation. She's offering them, the EU that is, free movement of people. She's offering them the offer of us staying in some sort of customs union. She is begging them to give her any sort of deal at all so that she can save face. and I've obtained a bit of exclusive audio. Theresa May is in a hotel room in Brussels, and she's on her knees in front of Jean-Claude Juncker, Michel Barnier, and Donald Tusk. This is not pretty. Theresa May is begging.
Okay. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll pay you. Okay, I'll do anything you want. I'll suck your cock. Okay, all of you guys.
Suck our cocks?
Yeah.
Is she any good?
No.
And what am I asking you for? You probably showed her how. Shut up.
Yeah, that was Michel Barnier asking David Davis, is she any good? They don't want May to literally suck their cocks. Quality radio. And as we speak, May is like a headless chicken, wearing incontinence trousers to stop the leaking from her knickers. She is shit scared. Is that crude? Is it crass? Might be, but it's a good metaphor for what's going on. She's now offering them anything if they will agree to some sort of deal. But they don't give a shit because her career is virtually over and she has nearly outlived her usefulness. What a scenario. What a scenario. And in the House of Rothschild, in the Rockefeller Warburg mansions, they smile because democracy is a joke told at parties these days. It's the Richie Allen Show, 16 minutes past the hour. And the European Union, if it doesn't get any more sick, is now pretending that it must do something on migration. They've been very contrite, but don't believe him. We've gotten it wrong on immigration, they said today, and if we don't sort it out, we'll see nationalism on the rise and we'll see anti-EU sentiment growing. Heaven forbid, eh? So this ludicrous idea has been proposed to pay North African countries to hold migrants and to vet them on Europe's behalf. Basically to sort out the wheat from the chaff. Honest to Christ, you couldn't make it up. Who came up with that one? Let's ask the North African countries to keep all of these migrants and they can do the cherry picking on our behalf. Who came up with it? Adam Bolton, Bunter as he's known, clown-in-chief at Sky News, suggested to a woman called Claudia Gazzini that this was a viable solution. When Claudia Gazzini responded to him, she's a Libya analyst at the International Crisis Group, she basically hands him his arse. This is Claudia Gazzini, the Libya analyst at the International Crisis Group. She's responding to the suggestion that North African countries can vet the migrants if they're paid to do so by Europe. This is just gold.
Well, it's a solution that cannot be implemented and there's very little political will. The problems are two, essentially. Libya is a country that absolutely cannot implement such a project in the sense that it is a state that is barely functioning. And in order to have such disembarkation centers that are functioning with human rights and screening, proper screening, you need to be able to be present on the territory and control the territory. At the moment, Libya, the internationally recognized government in Libya, can operate in Tripoli and the surrounding area, and that's why the greatest part of the international efforts to curb migration are only limited to that part of the country. International assistance missions and UN agencies and humanitarian agencies cannot operate in the south, so it would make sense to have these centers in the south of Libya, which is the main entry point for most migrants. But it's a no man's land with a patchwork security and literally no international access. So at the moment, Libya is a non-state and it cannot deliver on that. And then the second problem is political. Countries like Tunisia and Egypt, of course, are better functioning states, but the idea of being an instrument for European countries to deal with their migration problem is a political no-no for most of these countries. Over the past few years, various European European leaders have asked Tunisia specifically to cooperate and possibly house these screening centers or disembarkation centers, as you want to call them. But the answer has been always no. The countries don't want to have to deal with the migration problem, which would add on to a series of problems that these countries already have: security, economy, and so on. So there's no chance of having the cooperation of North African states, and in the case of Libya, there's no chance of being able to implement any of these measures.
Yeah, Libya is a failed state, and you wanted to vet migrants on your behalf. Outside of Tripoli and the surrounding areas, the country is a basket case. She sounded cold, she looked cold, and patently thought Adam Bolton is a fuckwit. Your former Prime Minister, Barack Obama, David Cameron, of course, Barack Obama and Nicolas Sarkozy fucking destroyed Libya. It's a failed state, and you wanted to vet migrants.
What kind of fuckery are you?
Wow. What does Nigel Farage think of this plan?
And we've got this very strange situation where an incoming Eurosceptic Italian government is asking the EU to do more, and a pro-EU German government is saying maybe the nation state should do a bit more. The fact the numbers are lower does not mean that in terms of voters' minds this issue is anything other than number one.
What do you think the answer is? Is it to set up camps in Africa?
This is absolutely. I mean, I said this right at the start when Juncker launched this policy in 2015. Do what the Australians did. If people are eligible for genuine refugee status, you must process them off.
But those camps on islands off Australia, I mean, humanitarian conditions there are very, very poor indeed.
I accept it wasn't a very pretty picture, but nor 8,000 or 9,000 people drowning in the last 3 years in the Mediterranean.
And just finally, how do you feel about this report, again from the Intelligence Committee this morning, that British officers, intelligence officers, knew the Americans were torturing people and didn't do enough to stop them?
I believe it. I think we turned a blind eye. I think we went through a very peculiar period in our history where we said yes to everything Brussels said and yes to everything Washington said.
Yeah, so Farage thinks it's a good idea to process people offshore. Let the North Africans sort it out. At the end there, you heard about, big story today, the United Kingdom knowing that US detainees were being tortured, and we turned a blind eye to it, or maybe we assisted it. The BBC reported today, everybody else did, that the UK tolerated inexcusable treatment of US detainees after September the 11th. The Intelligence and Security Committee said British agencies continue to supply intelligence to allies despite knowing or suspecting abuse in more than 200 cases. The chairman of the committee, Dominic Grieve, the former Attorney General, well, he said agencies knew of incidents that were plainly unlawful. The findings have sparked calls, of course, for an independent judge-led inquiry. We are swimming in inquiries which end up as nothing more than whitewashes. So what did Dominic Grieve say on Sky News? Did UK intelligence agents take part in the torture of detainees overseas on bases or whatever? What did he say?
To be quite clear, there is no evidence that British intelligence officers tortured or ill-treated anybody. There is plenty of evidence that on quite a large number of occasions they witnessed or were made aware of the mistreatment of detainees in a variety of ways. And in many instances they fed that information back to headquarters, but nobody joined up the dots, and as a consequence no action was taken, certainly until 2005, to actually alert ministers or indeed to raise concerns at the highest level as to what the United States was doing, or to decide where that placed the United Kingdom in terms of its own lawfulness.
No evidence, my arse. Just open the drawers, man. There's evidence bulging out of the drawers, down behind the sofa, under the cushions, under the bed. It's everywhere that UK intelligence agencies were complicit in it and took part in it. Shaka Armour said, God love him, spent well over a decade at Guantanamo Bay for nothing. said that there were guys with UK accents present at some of the interrogations. No evidence, my arse. Adam Bolton then asks Grieve a good question for the first time in a while.
In terms of intelligence gathering, was the UK actually benefiting from information gained by duress?
That's a more difficult question to answer. You've got to understand that in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, there were very real fears that there would be a further terrorist attacks, including potentially in the United Kingdom. So the reason for cooperating so closely with the United States and becoming embedded with the United States in Afghanistan and then later in Iraq was to try to obtain information that might save lives here in the United Kingdom. That's a completely legitimate objective. But one's got to bear in mind that any legitimate objective has got to be pursued by lawful means, and the unlawfulness was quite clear as to what the United States was doing, and we failed for quite a long time to react appropriately to it.
Because we were doing it ourselves, that's why. Our intelligence agents and our intelligence agencies knew that bin Laden had nothing to do with September the 11th. But it didn't make any difference when it came to torturing people. What about air bases then? Air bases on UK soil. Were people rendered? Were they transferred through those bases? Were they maybe even tortured at those bases?
Does that mean you're confident that the UK wasn't used, perhaps through the air bases that the Americans have in our country?
Because the records are incomplete in some cases, one can't have 100% certainty, but there is absolutely no evidence that the United Kingdom was used as a transshipment point for individuals being unlawfully rendered from one place to another. There are some, I think, rather more worrying examples where the United Kingdom appeared to be willing to facilitate rendition, even though a moment's thought should have made people realise that what was being done was clearly unlawful at international law.
A moment's thought. Facilitating rendition is just as bad as conducting the waterboarding yourself, because you know where the poor, misfortunate Egypt is being taken and what's going to be done to him. So if you facilitate that, you're just as guilty as the guy putting the sponge in the bucket, putting the cloth over his face and simulating the drowning.